As readers, of course, it is very important to be able to read the words in the story. However, it is also important that we do more than just read the words. As we read, we want to think about what is happening and create our own ideas about the story. To do this, we use active reading strategies. Active reading strategies help us think deeper about a story and what is happening. They also help us to comprehend the story more clearly and become stronger thinkers. Sometimes, when we are reading, we think to ourselves, "Wow, that reminds me of another book I read." When this happens, it is called making a connection. A connection while reading means that we can think how the story we are currently reading reminds us of something else. Something that happens in the story or to the character may make us connect to another book or character, to a movie we've seen, something that is happening in the world around us, or even in our own lives. One fun thing about reading is that everyone can have their own opinion about what they read. I might think something I read is very funny, and another person might read the same thing and not laugh. When we have these feelings about the things we read, it is called reacting. Reacting just means that the story makes us feel different emotions. Maybe one part of the text makes us angry at a character, and another part makes us feel bad for the same character. We can react throughout a story, and these reactions may be very different at different parts. When we read a story, sometimes it is fun to guess what may happen next. It's almost like we are detectives, using clues in the story to help us think about what might occur. When we do this, it is called making a prediction. We can predict before we read by using the title and pictures, and also, while we are reading, using the events in the story to help us think about what will happen next or later in the story. Have you ever read a story and made a picture in your mind of what was happening? If so, you've used the active reading strategy called visualizing. When you visualize, you make a picture or movie in your mind of what is happening in the story. Of course, you use clues and details from the story to help you create these pictures. As the story goes on, you gain more information from the story. You may change your pictures or movies.
The bed. "Heaven," said Mrs. Lambchop. "Gosh," said Arthur. "Stanley's flat as a pancake," said Mrs. Lambchop. "Darnest thing I've ever seen." "Let's all have breakfast," Miss Lambchop said. "I visualized that he's as thin as paper."
Have you ever read a story and a question popped into your mind about what was happening? Maybe you were questioning why a character did something. Or maybe you asked yourself what you would do if you were in the story. If this has ever happened to you, you've used the active reading strategy called questioning. As readers, it is important that we ask ourselves questions while we read to help us understand the story even more. We can even ask ourselves questions before we read, like, what will this story be about? And questions when we finish reading. For example, we might ask ourselves, how could that story have ended differently? Sometimes, when you are reading, you may be able to read a word, but you might not know what it means. Or you may read a part of your book and stop and think, I don't understand what I just read. When that happens, we need to do something called clarify. When we clarify our reading, we stop and figure out the things that are confusing or the words we don't know. When we read any type of text, we want to make sure that we are holding on to the important parts in our minds. Then, when we are finished reading, we can use these important parts to retell what has happened in our own words. If there are pictures in the story, we can remind ourselves what happened by flipping through the book and looking at the pictures too.
Now I'm going to ask you to retell the story from the beginning all the way to the end, okay?
Okay, so wait, did I tell you this part too?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so a ranger, he goes like.
Lots of times when we are reading, we do something called inferring without even realizing we are doing it. When we infer, it means we understand more about the story and can figure out what is going on, even though the author might not tell us directly. To infer, we think about what we already know from our lives and experiences, and we add that to what is happening in the story to create our own ideas and thoughts. You have just learned lots of information about how strong readers take time to comprehend what they are reading by using the active reading strategies. Let's take a minute to reflect and think about how this information helps us as readers. Let's ask ourselves, how might these active reading strategies help you become a stronger reader? So remember, today and every day, you want to use active reading strategies to help you think about what you are reading. In the next tutorial, you will learn about how you can make reading your own.